official reading partner with the McCormick Writing Center. So we get to host amazing residents at least four times a year. So we have two tonight, and I'm the lucky person to get to introduce them. We have first up Lauren-Abunassar. Her is a Palestinian-American writer, poet, and journalist. Her work has appeared in Poetry, Narrative, Rattle, Prairie Schooner, Boulevard, and elsewhere. Her first book, Coriolis, was winner of the 2023 Edel Adnan Poetry Prize. She is a 2025 MEA Fellow in Poetry, and we are so lucky to have you here at the series and here in Portland. Welcome. We hope you are having a great time.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you to everyone for being here. This is such a lovely space to read in and such amazing company too. So I thought I'd read two older poems and then two newer poems that I've been working on. The project I'm working on right now is, in theory, my second collection. It's a hybrid manuscript that's largely about my family's immigration from Palestine. So I'm thinking a lot about things like erasure, intergenerational storytelling, inheritance, all of those things. And I was trying to think a little bit about when that project really started sitting with me. I think it began when I started writing about my teta, so my grandmother. So I have a bunch of new grandmother poems in my project, but I thought I'd kind of go back in time to the first one I wrote. So that's what I'll start with. It's called Field Guided Sonnet. My grandmother splits plums by the river. Her thumbs are the thumbs of a god. They divide, they multiply, they extend. She chews a mint leaf down until it is her own green-colored spit. And when she smokes, the ash does not fall without her say-so. So she is a study in force, how to channel the mighty in her own live hands. I told her once, I don't know how to not be shaped or how to move beyond this. She said, this is a question of life, get over it. Her mercy flows like a clumsy river. It moves mad and it carries a hazard of surprises. She surprises me by saying grief is no more than a postcard in lieu of a letter, a plum where a garden should be, a disappointment you pull from the root. Look, the onwards in the looking, she says, to the history of other derailments and the women who have tendered their manner of moving on. She is a woman who knows pain is no more than a wager on survivability. She dreams in the language of history. When she eats, she keeps one hand open. When she prays, she requires no answers. Still, when she sleeps, she whispers what I whisper. I want something for keeps. Okay, so I'll read. This poem is kind of an older poem, kind of a newer poem, and then I've been editing it for a few years now. And I'm kind of starting to think it might not ever be finished, but I've never read it out loud, so I figured why not give it a try. It's called Instructions for Breaking, or Simultaneity of Absence. H says he'll teach me how to swim, how to drink chlorine without choking. Call it distraction, call it surviving, call it summer here, liquid and prismatic, a day that wants a throat to dry. Where just months earlier, October, my mind filled with water, could not be emptied or sopped up, warped like oak swelling, humming out an empty hymn. 2. In December, ice cleaved its frozen wing on a swimmer's neck, and now they are emptying the pools in Corpus Christi. They want that bald concrete as monument to absence. Everything is breakable. But what interests me is the lighthouse miles away, 6 window panes all scratched. In June, a boat crashed there, smashing the break wall and living to tell the story. I can't help but listen and think of asking someone to come back for me, like H, suspended in some cold morning, trying to make, despite it all. Death clashes at his window. His hymns no longer sound like hymns, more like the bikers that commute from Pennsylvania. They drown out even the weather. H says he'll run with them someday, find rest in a dry acre where some people win and keep winning, where nothing is lost. I'll stay behind and grow apricots and small shadows in the corners of my frostbitten mind. I'll howl at the empty moon and wonder if somewhere the sound might reach. 3. Meanwhile, our parents went to church. The ocean went and changed its mind, troubled with the moon needling its dark body, rhythmic as a palpitation in a body that wants a tidal wave. Overtake me, I said to H, but he went to photograph the war, a fig suspended in the sad remnants of a river, the feeling of hunger more thick in the throat than a prayer for rain. He says he'll come back for the old dream, of horses running just because, of children living like it was their right, the sky untattered and wet with possibility. The last night was the first night I didn't dream about running. Last night I dreamt there was more in the water than our own transfiguration. Instead, a great swimmer, not wasted prayers for a getaway, not the dream itself, disassembled and far. 4. As a girl, H showed me the car left lost by the river, the rusted out wheel wells like dried blood we left on the carpet. I knew it would change me. It didn't. I tried to become a swimmer. I believed a wheel becomes a dare. A lever becomes a misused answer. A river is a means to its own end. This lost dwarfed in the face of another. Grief in her misused hierarchy. An object in the hands that will always drop it. I could stay away, mime the choir, never drink the last inch of water in the glass, never pray for myself again, never swim barefoot or dream thoughtlessly, never ask for a second chance or to run into the desert and stay there. Or I could promise myself what I promised H, you will live, you will live, you will live. In my new project, I'm working with a lot of hybrid forms, so forms with images embedded in them, some video poems, sound poems, and I have a series of poems that are laid out to look like maps to places that don't actually exist, which is not like super important to know before I read this. It's just to say this poem is one of those map poems, and it's called What the Fish Say Over There. My godson wanted to go look at fish, but I told him today beauty is canceled. We cried, I felt bad. I counted the unbeautiful like broken ribs, shrapnel in the olive tree, child-sized tourniquet, St. Porphyrius watching and weeping. My father phones to tell me they're down to vinegar. They pour into open wounds. His friend found some wild tomatoes, cooked them in the street for his children. Over there, it's a God-lent shovel, a murmur in water. The dark between angels is still time spent waiting for light. My father finds the photo albums to prove that streets once existed. My godson has not stopped describing his desire for fish. Their bodies are neon impossible. The water is full of his daydreams, and I scavenge his tiny wants. And after, I dream of the hospital, ice cream trucks filled with bodies. A friend dies on that blacktop like a fish. So few people will name him. I said, today I am choosing the space between angels. There's nothing left to choose. I sow beauty between layers of skin. It seeps out without my noticing. When I see it, I get angry because how dare life go on? My godson phones to say the fish are possible. We are possible. The sky is full of broken windows, and so is the dream. My eye sees the way the past lurches forward, covering ground like we cover old scars. It says what the fish say. Witness me. I'll just read one more. This one, it's funny how I think you kind of know the obsessions that you have when you're writing, and then they become like all the more apparent to you when you're reading out loud. So I'm recognizing like how much I write about dream, and dream is a space, dream not just like as a space of possibility, but as a space of wellness practice, of liberation, of politic. And so the new project I'm working on is called In Dreams I Am Always a Horse. And so I have a series of In Dreams I Am Always a Horse poems. And so I'll read one of them. 1. Sometimes crossing the room is the hardest thing. This counter, that bowl, these street lamps. 2 years ago, a flock of glass stuck beneath your skin. Today, still there. Tomorrow, still there. We learn habituation through grief. Joy disobeys order. Sometimes at night, I mistake the sound of traffic for rain. 2. The moon had its uses once, a tree full of figs. In Murthia, I could only ever eat when sitting by the river. At home, my mind is a thoughtless place. Often, at parties, I make up facts about animals to sound smart. Once I said something true by accident. Ducks, when threatened, weep into the shoulders of their lovers. The blood of birds smells like rain. For a dog, there is no greater gift than witness. 3. Once I was an impossible animal. Once I stripped the tires bare. Once I stepped into traffic. Once I employed cruelty. Once I emptied sandstorms. Once I ran into the ocean. Once I caught the last bus home. Once I opened all the windows. Once I crept towards vastness. Sometimes when I see wet leaves pasted on the sidewalk, I imagine the faces of people I have loved and lost. That's also sort of a lie. The possibility only just now occurred to me. The only place in the world is the crook of my brother's elbow, my father's neck, my mother's memory. In another life, this was a love poem. 4. I believe in the dark, oranges weep and lemons smile. I believe sanctuaries exist somewhere. I've never seen them. I believe that sometimes the future calls in sick, goes to the park, buys a sweater, catches the matinee. Everyone feels the great labor of arrival. Once my friend confessed to surreptitiously recording the conversation of 2 people breaking up in a park. I just wanted to keep that part of them, she told me. Sometimes I think my hunger for revelation is a distraction from life. I never quite noticed the exact moment the leaves had changed. 5. Jane Hirschfield wrote, "You must try," the voice said, "to become colder." But for years I misremembered this. Thought instead she said, "You must try," the voice said, "to become older." To become older, I harvest dead leaves. I take my shoes off by the door. I leave spare change in odd places. Imagine the types of people this might please. Sometimes I think the future calls in sick and invites me on a road trip. We skirt through dead canyons and dark valleys, the sky a wet sheet of almost and not yet overs. In the gas station, she buys the snacks and I buy decks and decks of playing cards. We find a river to float on, the clocks all break, the phones all die, the tides rush out and do nothing but vanish. I believe the horizon is an impossible object. The future celebrates me and says I've accomplished something. When I look out the window, there are wet leaves everywhere.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. You could have just kept going. It's like when you were like, this is the last one, I was like, it's too short. Thank you. Welcome to Portland, Farheen. I hope you're enjoying your stay. We're so happy to have you. Farheen Raparthi, she, her, is a writer and artist based in Virginia. She holds an MFA in fiction from George Mason University, where she was awarded a thesis fellowship. Her writing has received support from Ragdale and has been published in the Georgia Review. We hope your residency is so amazing, and we're so excited to hear you read. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here. I am going to read from a short story that I've been trying to expand into a novel. There's not really much you need to know because it's just the beginning. But it is called, currently, it's called All of Us on Telephone Exchange Street.
Woo!
Okay. The summer of 1979, the very month we learned an American space station, having veered off course, was expected to drop from the sky like a stone fruit and flatten one unlucky state, Gulshan Harumi's granddaughters watched a black and white cinema in which a group of celestial maidens descended onto the earth to sing and swim in a glistening river and were determined to recreate the experience for themselves. It was a swashbuckler of sorts, filled with sword fights and simple morals, and in the end, every wicked thing was vanquished by its righteous counterpart. A villainous brother was made good by a gallant hero. A curse that turned one to statue was met with a cure that could set free. Their mother was in Kuwait then, allegedly working as a beautician for the veiled and wealthy women of the Gulf, coloring hair and bleaching skin. But if so, why the calloused palms, we thought? If so, why the fainting spells, we thought? If so, why the hardened gaze of the fatigued and exploited, so concomitant with the physical laborers who returned from those areas, we thought? And upon calculating the sum of these elements, deduced that she was likely only a maidservant for some oil baron, mopping white marble floors with Harpic, no different and certainly no more cosmopolitan than the rest of us on Telephone Exchange Street. We were privy too to how the girls' father flitted in and out of the house, extinguishing with his hungry breath the last of the famed Haroonian heritage. All in all, it was apparent that this was a period in the girls' life when they answered only to Gulshan, whose faulty hearing and easy heart militated against proper parenting, which meant they were largely free to do as they pleased. Mostly what they pleased was riding our bicycle back and forth in the courtyard in front of our complex. It was an old atlas, passed down to them by their grandfather, and in a manner that unnerved Gulshan, the four of them rode it together, one perched on the handlebars, one pedaling, and two sitting side saddle on the back metal bench. On Sundays, they'd cycle to the tea stand, where they played matches of blackjack that stretched well into the evening, oftentimes triumphing over even our town's most seasoned players, all of whom would slink home, hands shoved into freshly empty pockets, cursing Nabil Azim Harouni for having passed on his blasted proclivities for card counting and swindling and general deception to his daughters. On these nights, Gulshan, by nature a fretful woman, would watch the girls depart from her usual position on the front steps and remain there reciting all 99 names of God under her breath until they returned to her unscathed. It was from here that she typically conducted her day's business, where she plaited her silver hair and cracked peanuts, or flagged down passers-by to inquire whether the call to prayer had been announced, pointing to her dull ears for context. It was here also that her sons would come to her to pocket and pawn the many gold piercings that lined her ears. On the pretext of emptying a waste bin or blowing the chaff from our rice, we watched from our stoops as they plied a new earring each month, and shook our heads in pity when we heard her ask only that they spare the bangles on her wrists. Long before they watched that cinema, and long before the subsequent consequences of this action, regarding which we maintain our unyielding innocence, we were outspoken about the imprudence of the girls' ungoverned state. There on her terrace, where we often congregated when the power was cut, Bibi Kulsum would lift the braid from her neck to fan the sweat underneath, and remark, apropos of nothing, how the girls were of a compromising age, and susceptible to malignant forces. Probed further, she would elaborate that she was talking, of course, about forces intent on plucking children from the branches they played in to panhandle for third-party syndicates, or otherwise convincing them to steal from their families large sums of money with which they might find their footing in the entertainment industries, though the latter was admittedly less of a concern, considering how all that remained of the Harouni wealth was the gold in Gulshan's ears and the few dinars the girls' mother mailed on a bi-weekly basis. She would concede that most of her fears were derived from the movies, but reasoned that the movies had derived their ideas from life itself, and so proved her hypothesis about there being a general all-around narrowing of goodness. We ourselves had already heard stories of friends of cousins or cousins of friends whose lives had been spoiled after having been seduced by promises of love or wealth or celebrity, and so were of similar belief regarding the growing degeneracy of our contemporary times. We did not think to consider that these incidents relayed to us were all just one story, tailored many times over for sensationalist purposes, as by then Warwani Ali would have found some way to blame everything on the advent of modern media, novels, and cinema. After all, he might say, shaking his head, who were we to whittle away the precious minutes of the one life God had granted us by imagining in our minds another? To which Bibi Kulsum, whose unhappy marriage had prompted her to seek refuge in radio shows and monthly magazines, would mutter under her breath something like, should we instead spend our precious minutes letting the wind whistle through our ears as you do? Then Warwani Ali's mood would sour, for we all knew he could only read and write at the LKG level, and so was sensitive about his intellectual capacities, and he would go mute until there arose within the conversation an opening for him to make a slight about Qasim Saab's connections to Naxalite organizations, and Qasim Saab would await the moment he could disparage Bisma Fawaz's spinster daughters, and Bisma Fawaz's ears would turn red until she landed a quip about Adnan Qureshi's failing perfume business, and so on and so forth. And since, upon having our private humiliation spotlighted, none of us could resist the temptation to impose that very feeling on someone else, and as, outside the scope of our town, all of us were within a similar strata of class, caste, and color, there existed amongst us no allegiances, yes, but also too no imbalance of power. In essence, we were all worms of equal stature, tilling the soil with our bitterness, turning on one another over and over again, for no reason beyond that this was the way it had always been. Well, maybe this is untrue. Maybe upon further introspection, we might explain that we had been shaped by a lifetime of scarcity, of shortages in sugar, power, petrol, and having survived and somehow overcome the conditions of our childhoods, we were desperate to anchor ourselves in this middle-class plane of existence, and to serve as a foothold for our children, who, in a manner that confirmed our notion that life was guaranteed to be, if nothing else, an upward quest, could then go on to surpass us, and their children, who could then go on to surpass them. Maybe we would tell you about how we petitioned our local lawmakers for English medium schools, how we bleached our whites whiter and starched our collars stiffer, how we replaced soap nuts with shampoo sachets and charcoal powder with peppermint paste, and how those of us with refrigerators situated them conspicuously in our living rooms to signal to the lesser people who spy through our open doors, to the meter men and the milk delivery boys and the mendicants on their way up the holy hills to tonsure their heads, that they ought not to mistake us as peers. Maybe we would finally reveal the root of it, which was that we wanted for everything that reflected to us the upper echelon, or an approximation of the upper echelon, copper bottom pressure cookers, melamine bowls, even carbon paper, for what could be more opulent than having triplicates, than having a spare for your spare? But since the turbulence of the decade had called for frugality, and since there were still the loan sharks to answer to, and the medical fees to pay, and the aging in-laws to support, the next best option was to put down those who had that which you did not, to point out their unmarried daughters or their inability to read or their dubious connections to insurgent groups, so as to remind them and to reaffirm to yourself that theirs was not so enviable a life after all. Despite our bickering, we dispensed confections on holidays, offered one another yogurt cultures and plants for propagation, and were in agreement that these were modern times, Western times, with nothing more evident of this than the very fact that man had moved beyond journeying through space, that expanse we had once only believed to be the domain of angels, to making a life within it. By then we had learned that an unexpected increase in solar activity had resulted in the decayed orbit of America's first space station, and the Americans, via telegram, had magnanimously provided a range of coordinates upon which their laboratory was to meet its terminus, a range we had had the woeful luck of being born within, and the preposterous temerity to have built our lives amongst. This was July, a historically parlous month in general, but with the return of the rain and the rolling blackouts. Our entire nation had already been named a potential landing site, and some had sold their cattle and cropland to travel to the holy cities, Kashi or Tirupati, hoping God merciful enough to spare those in his own backyard, while others chose to spend what they believed were their final days, squandering their savings on grandiosities, gleaming white ambassadors or silks woven with threads of 22-karat gold. As we typically did in times of turmoil, private or public, all of us on Telephone Exchange Street turned to Gulshan for direction. We'd come to believe she had a direct satellitic line to the unseen, and thus we often appealed to her with pleas to divert the winds of both devastating calamity and minor inconvenience alike. Gulshan herself did not entertain such ideas, instead attributing her circumstances to the will of God, but happily and without extorting payment, as the more business-minded among us might have. She took our requests. She prayed that Morwani Ali's exceptionally beautiful daughter would not be corrupted by any of the roadside Romeos she walked past on her path to the teacher's college, that the chemical runoff from the steel plant did not seep into Bibi Kulsum's neighboring plot, and that her land remained as fecund as Gulshan's own womb, which once harbored 17 children, however loaferish some of them might have turned out to be. She prayed for our health and jubilance, our safe departures and easy returns, and all that she prayed for, all that she wished upon us, was in some form or other realized. Though its soil was deemed inhospitable, Bibi Kulsum's land was bought out from under her for 5 times the asking price by the steel plant itself, which was looking to avoid litigation. And, after some politicking, a new government-funded bus transported Morwani Ali's daughter directly from her home to her college, and its tinted windows prevented loiterers, try as they might, from catching even the silhouette of her profile to caress in their dreams. Call it what you may, idolatry, sacrilege, blasphemy, but through Gulshan our destinies appeared malleable, and none of us, not even Qasim Sab and his sons, who beat their chests blue in the name of the one true God, could resist diluting that which was written into merely that which was recommended. So yes, that evening, following the arrival of the telegram, we convened at the front of the Haruni home to voice our concerns to Gulshan. Only much of this was interrupted by Nabil Azim's newfound interest in acquiring a political seat, and amid our explanations of the situation and our requests that Gulshan make a prayer on the town's behalf, he interjected with incendiary statements like, "Are we the custodians of the West to so happily sweep up the detritus of their space exploits?" which he combined with an exaggerated twirl to his mustache. An unexpected development, really, for Nabil Azim, whose defining quality was a lifelong antipathy for work to pursue a career, but he informed us that his creditors were willing to erase his debts in exchange for political favors, and posited that, considering the sheer number of people who were always cursing him under their breath, his had become a common household name, like Pons or Parley G, which meant even the lucky few whose pockets he'd not yet weaseled into would likely still punch their ballots for him, thanks to familiarity's sake. Had Gulshan not been to his left, had the girls not gathered on the stairwell just behind him, we'd have had half a mind to wave our slippers in his face and demand he pay back our loans first. Instead, we only held our tongues as he spoke in that aggravatingly glib way of his, and absorbed, for what felt like the first time, how much the girls truly resembled him. Their lanky build and long hands, the low arch of their eyebrows, and that same dimple in all 4 chins. In fact, we could not see their mother in them at all, not her rounded face or her widow's peak. In fact, what we saw of their mother was only her yawning absence in their life, which had prompted them to adopt certain erraticisms we cannot explain through anything other than a lack of appropriate supervision. Things like bathing at night and sleeping with damp hair, or clipping their nails after dusk and tossing the trimmings off the terrace ledge. They also whistled while they walked, long howling whistles which we instinctively, though without the language to explain why, found crass and offensive. Most troubling, though, were the rhymes they crafted to accompany their hand games, using obscene vocabulary which eventually wound its way through the minds and mouths of our children, who we would then be forced to punish, as this was the heart of our concern with the girls, that their peculiarities had become their habits had skewed their character, and their character mirrored to us the sort of disreputable persons our own children had the potential to become, and by extension the sort of damage that could be inflicted upon our own legacies, which might, despite all our scrupulous pruning, assume the same downward trajectory of that of the Rooney families. Now, in retrospect, we might concede that our resentment for their father colored our perception of the girls, and because of this, whatever mischief they engaged in, we were less likely to attribute to childish roguery, and instead accredit to some inherited waywardness. We might admit, when that first half-truth materialized, we considered it not an affront to the girls it had been about, but an indictment of the father they'd been born of, and so accepted it gleefully, peddled it even, into that second half-truth. Though let the record show we refuse any responsibility for the first rumor our half-truths went on to inform, or the second rumor, which was extracted from the first, like metal from ore, and cast into the shape of the anchor that sunk them. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. And, in our defense, it must be said, if a cow grazes in the field, why would you think to believe its calf grazed in the bank?
I don't know how the fiction writers build a whole world and stuff. It's puzzling to me and amazing. It's like a miracle. I am so delighted to welcome my friend Susan Nguyen. Susan's the author of Susan is the author of Dear Diaspora, which won the Prairie Schooner Book Prize, and has one of the most beautiful book covers of ever. It's just so gorgeous. So it won the Prairie Schooner Book Prize, an Outstanding Achievement Award from the Association of Asian American Studies, a New Mexico, Arizona Book Award, and was a finalist for the Julie Sook Award. She's currently the senior editor of Hayden's Ferry Review. Her poems have been nominated for Best of the Net and a Pushcart Prize and have appeared or are forthcoming in numerous publications. Her work has also received support from arts organizations, residencies, arts commissions, and more. She's received multiple fellowships, including one that enabled her to conduct an oral history project centered on the Vietnamese diaspora, in addition to teaching at ASU and the National University of Singapore. Her hobbies beyond reading and writing include photography, zine making, hiking, and otherwise being outdoors. Susan has books for sale. I'm just looking back on the table, as does, and Lauren does as well. So I'm gonna hype the books again, but just be thinking of the book hype in advance. I'm so enthusiastic about this work, and the one thing I want to say is whenever I teach one of Susan's poems, one of my students already knows who she is, which I think is pretty amazing and speaks to sort of the reach of Susan's work. All right, welcome, Susan.
I have some QR codes for y'all because I have some visual poems. Just in case y'all,
I'll hit that
helps
side.
me, so
All good.
yeah.
But don't
Actually pull them up yet.
Sure. good. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, you also don't have to pull them up, but just in case.
No, I think you do. I advocate.
You should listen.
That
to
you
Jessica.
should.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here. I haven't been here since, I was at the Tin House workshop with Jessica 6 years ago, 1 week before COVID hit, so it's been a long time. I'm super excited to be back. So I am going to read maybe 1 or 2 poems from my book, because I'd love it if you bought one. So I was at Powell's for 2 hours, and I need space in my luggage for the new books I bought. And then I'm going to read some new stuff that I've been working on that I'm very excited about. So I'm going to read a poem thinking about Virginia, since I am here of someone who is living in Virginia. It's about cicadas. I didn't realize until Jessica's students told me that Oregon doesn't have cicadas, which surprised me. It's so green and beautiful here. But yeah, growing up, we had the ones that came out every 7 years and 17 years from the ground and all that. This poem started with a memory that I don't know if it actually happened or not. But I do remember they came out from the ground when I was in elementary school, and I have a memory of kids eating them. I don't know if that's true or not, but it is now, because every time I read this poem, I'm like, I think that happened. Cicada summer. The cicadas come from the ground and enter the world in torrents. Streaming down tree trunks, over branches, across sidewalks and roads, the males pulsing their abdomens, singing for sex. In the field behind the school, Susie and her classmates stand still as dozens climb over their bodies, careful not to crush the winged insects beneath their feet, fearful of littering the ground with broken glass. Susie collects every wing she can find. Each one becomes a small body of water she carries in her pocket, a broken window pane she holds to each eye. She counts dozens more on her way home and imagines how they would taste. Hands in her pockets, touching the wings each fingertip, she wonders, would they still sing on the way to death, and would it sound any different? Today she walks through uneven fields of green and spits into tall grass, the roots of trees, listens as the clicking of cicadas fills her body with song. The green lacerates her ankles, and she imagines her blood mixed with dirt will nourish, will add to the muscle tremor of the earth. So the title of my book is Dear Diaspora. I have a few poems scattered throughout that are called Letters to the Diaspora. So the book follows a character, Susie with an I, who is a fictionalized version of myself, because I had to trick myself into writing this book when I was in grad school. But yeah, so I have a few of these poems throughout the book, and this is the first one that appears. Dear Diaspora, last night I had the American dream. In the dream, I had an indoor pool. In the dream, I walked my dead dog with a diamond leash. I ate a greasy burger with my perfect hands. I had the most beautiful sex. My skin was smooth, alabaster as the moon. In the morning, everything had changed. There was no pool, only twine for drying clothes. The dead remained dead. My perfect hands held nothing. Nothing was better.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna read. So, one of the manuscripts I'm working on is called Future Grief. So I'm still writing about language, Vietnamese diaspora, same obsessions, but I'm also have been thinking and writing about desire a lot. So I'm going to read a poem from that manuscript, and it's called Flight Path. Today is a good day, the first in a while, and I want to unbutton the sleeves of desire. Open all the windows and let April in. It's musty as hell in here. Let the sun take me by the shoulders and kiss the grooves of my collarbones. I'm alive and I have an appetite for longing. So let them all in, the birds, the strays, even the things that buzz in my ear. A fly dizzies past, languid, then promptly forgets the open window. He knocks again and again, louder and louder against the warm glass, looking for escape. God, to make a nuisance of my want until it's all anyone hears. To make my yearning known as I circle a room. I admire this lust for life, so I let him live. I fan him through the window with a dust rag like I'm waving goodbye to a lover. When I walk by the week-old box of oranges, I cause a commotion. A shadow of fruit flies lifts then disperses. A dead one floats in my glass. The smell of rot sharpens each day. Rings of blue mold appearing one by one until whole oranges turn ashen. Let them. Desire is not without casualty. I'm amazed that every insect that finds its way in makes it to water. The silverfish in the sink, the gnat hovering over the dripping faucet. It's a superpower. A hind knows for that which they cannot live without. I'd be lying if I said I never drowned them. Sometimes I want spectacle. I drop each silver orange down the drain and watch the spores erupt. Now if y'all want, if you want, you can pull up your QR codes now if you would like. So another project that I'm working on is called Hooray for English. It's a collection that's like 6 long interconnected poems. And the title Hooray for English comes from like these 1990s English language workbooks that I found my mom used and was learning from when she came to the US in the 90s after the war in Vietnam. And one, I just thought the title was, Hooray for English. But yeah, one thing that really struck me in this workbook that I found was one of the first units was about like US vacations, right? So it was about camping, like going camping, which I do love, but it was like how to pack and what to bring and like all these things. And I was just thinking of the word camp in my family and how that is known. So re-education camps in Vietnam after the war, which many members of my family were sent to, and then also refugee camps, which members of my family also were sent to, on the way to the US. So I wanted to complicate the meaning of the word camp. That's one of the original initial urges I think I had in reading the that workbook, and then I also just wanted to play a form on the workbook, so that's why I wanted you all to have the visuals in case you wanted to kind of follow along. So these are kind of sections I have from that much longer poem. So there are things like circle the correct word and draw a line from here to there, etc. So just trying to subvert the forms and also force the reader to do some work too, and like feel like, okay, as I'm reading this, I'm being tested on like the voice of this mother, right, and like her life experience, whereas my mom was learning, right, she was being tested on like, what do you bring on a U.S. camping trip, things like that. So those are some of the things I've been thinking about with this this project. So, okay. So as I guess if you are following along with the QR code, which you don't have to, but you'll just see I'm kind of choosing as I read, kind of making some decisions as I read. So, hooray for English. What is your name? I pronounce myself and shed velvet horns. No, I meant, what do people call you? Refugee. How old are you? I am several displacements old. What is your favorite hobby? If I stand still, I'm afraid I'll lie down. There's nothing you love to do. Love echoes in my throat like a morning glory. I pluck it. What do people find most interesting about you? They ask, where are you going? What do you recall most about your home country? I was a bright grammar, trampled berries against the road. Was everyone watching TV when the tanks rolled in? Yes, they were. Was it hard to sleep? No, it wasn't. Were children running in the streets? Yes, they were. Was furniture knocked over? Yes, it was. Was the phone ringing? No, it wasn't. Were the roads jammed? Yes, they were. Was the family together? No, they weren't. Were the clothes on the line? Yes, they were. Present. We go to camp at 7 o'clock. My mother thinks I cook for the neighbor. She walks to the gates. You are a bad daughter. I open my mouth. The neighbor plants melons. Future. We'll go to camp at 7 o'clock. My mother will think I cook for the neighbor. I will pack food the night before. She will walk to the neighbor's gates and look for me. You will be a bad daughter. I will open my mouth and contort. The neighbor will plant melons. I will carry 2 red halves. Past. We went to camp at 7 o'clock. My mother thought I cooked for the neighbor. I handed my love food that won't spoil. She walked to the neighbor's gates and counted the times she did not see me. I was the last daughter. I opened my mouth and contorted when I saw him. The neighbor planted melons. I armed myself with seeds. At first, the United States was boring. I was scared of the escalators. I kept waiting. It was like the plane, just an idea until I stepped onto it. People spoke about feeling dizzy, vomiting, so my left pocket cradled pills. We all carried plastic sleeves that wore our names and held our papers. Suddenly, everything I knew about my life was small. Before 75, I'd coveted my brother's brochures. Beautiful houses, mown lawns that looked painted and unreal. When I first arrived, they flashed in my mind, the photos, now true to life, and flying before me on the roads. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, just for the sake of time. So I realized I don't remember what I included on the QR code. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to do the last thing, so I would think it's maybe the last part of what I showed you. What does your daughter want? She crawled into English on all fours. Her tongue was velvet, but grew a swarm. Is it me or language that enrages her, makes her impatient with meaning? She speaks in her words, I speak in mine. We chase each other through the murmuration. When we talk, we are chasing ourselves. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Once again, I have to talk at the end of this, and I actually kind of want to cry. So, some of you are new and you haven't heard maybe my philosophy of books. The universe puts the book in front of you that you need, and you need it. So if you've been looking at some of these books staring out at you, some of these books on the table, and you feel like you have like a little inkling that maybe that book is for you, listen, it's for you. And your space will expand infinitely to fit them, and the money that you spend on them is not real. So, please join us upstairs if you want to for food and drinks, and say hello to the amazing readers. Let's hear it for them one more time. Bringing your energy and attention. We hope to see you next month.